a tomb that the world has been searching for across nearly 800 years, yet not a single person has ever managed to locate it. The final resting place of the most powerful conqueror in history, Genghis Khan, the man who brought close to half the entire world under his dominion, has stood as one of the greatest unsolved mysteries of all time. What makes this tale even more puzzling are the strange events that have befallen those who attempted to find his burial site. Numerous explorers have reported that their equipment suddenly ceased to function. Some individuals fell gravely ill without any clear explanation. Several expeditions were struck by accidents that nobody could adequately account for. As the years passed, people began referring to it as a curse. Then, after nearly 1,000 years of unsuccessful attempts, an international team announced that they had uncovered a sealed chamber concealed beneath an enormous rock. But when the door to that hidden room was finally opened, what greeted them only raised far bigger questions. Was this truly the long-lost tomb of Genghis Khan? And was there a secret buried alongside him that someone had wanted kept from the world forever? Throughout this video, we are going to unravel this entire mystery one step at a time. So make sure you stay with us right through to the very end. What was discovered inside that chamber did not merely shock historians, it left the entire world speechless. Before we get into all the details, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. The moment we hear the name Genghis Khan, we picture a warrior who conquered a vast portion of the globe. But his story did not begin inside a royal palace. It began with hardship and suffering. He was born around 1162 on the sweeping plains of Mongolia, and his name at birth was Temujin. During his early years, life took a dramatic turn that would shape everything about the person he was to become. When Temujin was just 9 years old, his father was poisoned and murdered by members of the rival Tatar tribe. Following his father's death, even his own tribe turned their backs on the family and walked away. Temujin, his mother, and his siblings were left completely alone out in the open grasslands. They had no shelter, no food, and nobody willing to help them. On many occasions, they kept themselves alive by hunting wild animals, fishing, and pulling roots out of the ground to eat. Every single day was a battle for survival. During this period, tensions within the family began to surface as well. His older half-brother Begder frequently seized control over the food supply and other resources. Things deteriorated to such a degree that Temujin and his brother Khazar eventually killed Begder together. This moment alone reveals just how desperate and brutal their existence had become. From a very young age, Temujin came to understand that the world offered very little room for those who were weak. Those harsh circumstances did not simply make him tougher. They also shaped him into someone extraordinarily sharp and calculating. When enemies came after him, he understood how to conceal himself. When circumstances turned against him, he knew how to hold back and wait for the right moment. Little by little, he mastered the ability to bring people together, earn their loyalty, and overcome his opponents. These were precisely the qualities that would one day transform an orphaned boy named Temujin, who had grown up enduring relentless hardship, into one of the most formidable rulers the world has ever known, Genghis Khan. At that time, Mongolia was fragmented into numerous small tribes, and every one of them was determined to prove itself the most powerful. But Temujin persuaded them that if they came together as one, they could take on the entire world. In the year 1206, a grand assembly was convened at which the Mongol chieftains bestowed upon Temujin the title of Genghis Khan. It signified a ruler who stood as the leader of all peoples. He did not simply raise an army. He overhauled the entire system from the ground up. Among his greatest innovations was his decimal-based military structure. Units of 10 soldiers were formed first, followed by groups of 100, then 1,000, and finally formations of 10,000. This arrangement made the army far simpler to command and allowed rapid decisions to be taken in the heat of battle. Genghis Khan also established a code of law known as the Yasa. This code brought the entire empire together under a unified set of rules, placing enormous emphasis on discipline, loyalty, and justice. Traders and messengers were kept safe under his watch, and this strengthened ties between faraway lands. On top of that, he established a postal and communication system known as the Yam. Relay stations were set up at even intervals, each stocked with fresh horses, so that messages could cover hundreds of miles within a remarkably short span of time. From there, Genghis Khan launched one military campaign after the next. China, Central Asia, and numerous mighty empires all crumbled before him. The sheer speed, tactical brilliance, and iron discipline of his forces left his enemies in disbelief. Within only a few decades, his empire reached from the Pacific Ocean all the way to the Caspian Sea. It is commonly said that around 1/4 of the entire world's population was living under his sway or control in some form or another at that time. Death, of which 4 separate accounts exist. When Genghis Khan stood at the very height of his power, barely anyone could have imagined that his passing would itself become a riddle. In the year 1227, he was leading what would be his last campaign, this one directed against the Western Xia Empire. The rulers of Western Xia had previously refused to support the Mongols, and Genghis Khan regarded this as an act of betrayal. He therefore returned to the field of war to make them pay for it. The campaign turned out to be a success. Yet during that period, something took place that the Mongol army carefully concealed from the outside world. What makes all of this so fascinating is that even now, nobody knows with any certainty how Genghis Khan actually died. Several different versions of his death have been passed down through time. One account tells that he was thrown from his horse during a hunt, and that the fall caused grave internal injuries from which he eventually died. Another version holds that he was struck by an arrow in battle, and that this wound gradually robbed him of his life. Certain historians are of the view that illness brought about his end. Many point to something like typhus, given how quickly such diseases swept through armies on long campaigns. Yet the mystery does not stop there. An ancient Mongol legend even speaks of lightning striking him down, suggesting that his death came by the will of the sky god Tangri. One man's death, and 4 entirely different explanations. That is precisely what makes this mystery cut so much deeper. But what followed was even more astonishing. His army made no announcement of his death straight away. The soldiers pressed on with the campaign as though nothing unusual had occurred. They were determined not to let their enemies find out that the most powerful ruler the world had ever known was gone. His death remained a closely guarded secret right up until the Western Xia capital fell, and the final victory was firmly in hand. Genghis Khan had not simply died. His death had been concealed from the world, and before long his body would be taken to a place whose secret was destined to remain out of human reach for the next 800 years. What followed Genghis Khan's death is regarded by many as one of the most chilling and mysterious funerals ever recorded in history. Mongol soldiers bore his body back in the direction of Mongolia, but this was no ordinary procession of mourning. The purpose was not merely to lay their great leader to rest, but to hide the location of his grave from the world for all time. According to numerous historical accounts, anyone who happened to cross the path of the funeral convoy was shown no mercy. A lone traveler spotted along the road was killed on the spot. If villagers were unfortunate enough to witness the procession passing through, they too were put to death. The Mongol soldiers were absolutely determined that no one would ever be able to reveal which direction Genghis Khan's body had been carried. Gradually, the journey itself transformed into a trail of death and silence. Even once the burial site had been chosen, the secrecy was far from over. It is said that the slaves who dug the grave were killed as soon as their work was done. The soldiers who had taken part in the burial were then killed as well. Some of the older accounts even suggest that these executions went on until not a single living soul remained who knew the precise location. In this way, the secret was buried together with every person who had helped to protect it. But the Mongols did not stop there. The land surrounding and above the burial site was transformed beyond recognition. It is said that thousands of horses were driven across that ground to wipe away every trace left behind in the earth. Any evidence of digging vanished permanently beneath the animals' hooves. Certain legends also suggest that trees were planted across the site so that, given enough time, the entire location would appear to be nothing more than natural woodland. Beyond that, some ancient accounts even claim that rivers flowing nearby were rerouted so that no one could ever identify exactly where the place was. Whether all of these accounts are fully accurate or not, one thing stands out clearly. The Mongols put every conceivable effort into ensuring that Genghis Khan's final resting place would never be discovered. Centuries went by, empires crumbled, and dynasties came and went, yet the mystery stayed buried. And the most astonishing detail was that as time moved on, not just the grave itself disappeared, but the entire surrounding region became part of the secret. The true protection was never simply the tomb alone. The whole landscape had been transformed into something like a trap. The 800-year-old mysterious guardians keeping Genghis Khan's tomb concealed. It was not merely individual lives that were taken, but an entire system was built that safeguarded this secret for nearly 800 years. This system was referred to as the Ik Korig, meaning the Great Taboo or the Great Forbidden Zone. It designated a place where common people were absolutely prohibited from setting foot. For generation after generation, no outsider was ever permitted to enter that territory. The responsibility for watching over this sacred ground was handed to a specific community known as the Darkhad. Their role went beyond simply standing guard. They were also tasked with keeping alive the secret that their ancestors had entrusted to them many generations before. It is widely believed that they kept watch over Burkhan Khaldun and the vast stretches of forest covering the Khenti Mountains around it. This was the very land that Genghis Khan had regarded as deeply holy throughout his life. What is truly remarkable is that this vigil did not last merely a handful of years or a couple of generations. It endured for close to 800 years. Empires rose and collapsed. Wars were waged, new rulers came and were replaced, and even the entire Soviet period came and went. Yet the Darkhad community held firm to their obligation. They never sought recognition, never desired great compensation, and never attempted to bring their story to the attention of the wider world. Each generation simply handed the duty on to the one that followed. This is the element that gives historians the most reason to pause. Why would a community dedicate so many centuries to protecting a single grave? Were they solely guarding the place where Genghis Khan was laid to rest? Or were they keeping hidden a secret that someone believed should never be revealed to the outside world? Expeditions that ended in death and failure. The mystery surrounding Genghis Khan's tomb stayed concealed across the centuries. But as science and technology moved forward, people began to feel confident that such a secret could not remain buried indefinitely. During the 20th century, the modern hunt for the tomb got properly underway. Historians, archaeologists, and explorers arriving from across the globe were determined to unravel this puzzle. They were convinced that with modern technology at their disposal, they would at last reach the location that had been kept hidden for 800 years. Every available method was deployed during the search. Satellite imaging was employed to examine the mountains and forests from high above. Ground-penetrating radar, known as GPR, was used to scan for hidden structures lying beneath the surface of the Earth. Techniques such as magnetometry were also applied to determine whether any unusual constructions had been buried underground. Yet the more technology was thrown at the problem, the more complex the mystery appeared to grow. Among the most significant efforts was the Three Rivers Expedition, a collaborative research project between Japan and Mongolia. The team conducted a thorough survey of Burkhan Khaldun and the areas surrounding it. They uncovered several graves dating to the Mongol era, along with weapons, jewelry, and the remains of horses that had been sacrificed. But they found no definitive trace of Genghis Khan's tomb. It almost felt as though the place had been deliberately wiped from the historical record. Following that, American lawyer and explorer Maury Kravitz gave a substantial portion of his life to unraveling this puzzle. He chased leads for years, financed expeditions, and worked tirelessly across Mongolia. Yet the answer eluded him throughout his lifetime. Even after he passed away, many continued to believe he had gotten closer to the truth than anybody before him. Later on, researcher Albert Eumann Lin started applying modern, non-invasive methods, drawing on satellite imagery, remote sensing tools, and computer-based analysis. He attempted to surface fresh leads. His team did turn up some intriguing signs, yet even so, the precise location of the tomb could not be confirmed. Around the same time, tales of strange occurrences began to circulate. Several team members reportedly fell suddenly ill while conducting the search. A handful of individuals claimed their health recovered the moment they left the region. During one particular expedition, a helicopter abruptly developed mechanical trouble and was forced into an emergency landing. One drone operator reported that his device kept switching itself off when flying above a specific valley. Certain surveyors also found themselves caught up in accidents that seemed far too unlikely to be ordinary. Scientists dismissed all of these events as mere coincidences, yet the local population held an entirely different view. In their belief, the land itself was actively guarding the secret buried within it. Time moved on, expeditions arrived and departed, but the riddle of the tomb remained completely unchanged. And then one explorer put forward an idea that shifted the whole direction of the story entirely. One man declared, "Perhaps we have all been searching in the wrong place altogether." Mountain X theory and the hidden clue. After decades of searching, multi-million-dollar expeditions, and the deployment of cutting-edge technology, not a single solid lead about Genghis Khan's tomb had surfaced. The majority of people had begun to accept that this mystery might never be unraveled. But then a fresh theory emerged that sent the entire search off in a wholly different direction. This idea would eventually come to be called the Mountain X theory. The explorer who brought this theory forward was Alan Nichols. He was convinced that everyone had been committing one fundamental error. The bulk of expeditions had concentrated on Burke and Kalaldun and the Khenti mountain range, because the long-standing assumption was that Genghis Khan had been laid to rest close to his birthplace. Alan Nichols, however, was not fully persuaded by that reasoning. His argument was straightforward. If the Mongols genuinely intended to conceal the tomb for all time, why would they select the very location where every searcher would look first? He proposed that the remains might have been transported a great distance, and that the true burial site could lie several hundred kilometers away from that region. This line of reasoning drew his attention toward the area surrounding the Yellow River. That region today forms part of Inner Mongolia, which sits under Chinese authority. This detail made the entire matter considerably more complex. It was no longer purely an archaeological undertaking, but had also become a deeply sensitive political question. Were the tomb of a figure like Genghis Khan to be uncovered within Chinese borders, its cultural and political weight would be immense. Alan Nichols and his modest team launched their initial surveys with resources that were far from abundant. They examined several locations that had been almost entirely overlooked in previous searches. According to various reports, they detected some unusual signals beneath the surface of the ground. The scans revealed anomalies that did not appear to be naturally occurring. In certain spots, the data pointed toward the possible existence of hollow spaces or man-made underground chambers. For the very first time, the explorers genuinely felt they might be standing on the edge of a significant discovery. But that was when the difficulties began, all stemming from the political sensitivity of the area. Moving ahead proved far from straightforward. Numerous critical permission processes ground to a halt. Funding gradually began to dry up, and after a period of time, several planned operations were placed on hold. What had already been uncovered was kept within a very tight circle. Barely any of it managed to filter out to the wider world. The years rolled by, and it began to look as though this lead would vanish into the folds of history, just like so many searches that had come before it. Yet behind closed doors, something quite different was unfolding. It is said that quiet conversations continued among several distinct parties. The full substance of those discussions was never revealed to the public, but many believe they ultimately paved the road toward the expedition that later claimed to have located a mysterious sealed chamber buried beneath an enormous rock. And this is the point where the story steps into its most gripping chapter, the day that stone was finally lifted away. After years of searching, arguing, and waiting, the moment that historians and researchers across the globe had longed for finally arrived. The expedition that claimed to have reached this mysterious chamber was reportedly carried out under rigorous oversight. UNESCO observers were said to be present alongside representatives from Mongolia, China, and the Darkhead community, all watching every significant step with close attention. This was far more than a simple archaeological dig. It was an effort to reach the doorway of a secret that had remained shut for nearly 800 years. During the excavation, ground-penetrating radar, commonly known as GPR, had picked up some unusual readings. Those signals pointed the researchers toward a possible chamber concealed beneath a large rocky formation. From above the ground, everything appeared completely ordinary, yet the subsurface data strongly suggested something was hidden down there. After months of grueling effort, the moment arrived when the team came upon the stone seal blocking the entrance. As the work of clearing those stones got underway, every single person present locked their gaze onto that one spot. According to accounts from the scene, the instant the seal was broken, a rush of cold air came surging out from within. Several team members mentioned this detail when they later described what had happened. Some even claimed to have noticed a faint white mist drifting out through the gaps between the stones. But what drew the most attention was an unusual smell that nobody could quite place. It bore no resemblance to soil, decay, or anything anyone had encountered before. It felt as though a space sealed away for centuries was drawing its very first breath. For a brief stretch of time, absolute silence settled over the entire area. When the researchers finally made their way into the mysterious chamber, the first thing that stunned them was how large it was. According to the initial reports, the chamber measured roughly 40 feet in length, 20 feet across, and stood close to 12 feet high. The entire space had been cut directly out of the rock and sealed above with enormous stone slabs. It had clearly been constructed not merely as a burial site, but as a stronghold designed to protect whatever lay inside for generations to come. As the beams of their flashlights swept across the walls, ancient Mongol inscriptions began to emerge from the darkness. Some appeared to be prayers, while others were said to recount battles and events of great significance. There were also a number of symbols whose meanings had not yet been fully interpreted. Words that had sat hidden in darkness for 800 years were at last being read by human eyes. But the true astonishment came when the light landed on the objects arranged inside the chamber. A warm golden glow spread across the room. Weapons had been laid out with great care around the central space. Swords, bows, ceremonial maces, and numerous items associated with warfare were all visible. Standing nearby was a set of magnificent armor adorned with gold and precious stones. Carved across its surface were wolves, eagles, and horses, symbols that carry deep meaning within Mongol culture. Experts noted that these artifacts reflected not only the artistry of the Mongols, but also the influence of Chinese, Persian, and Central Asian traditions. It was like peering through a window into the vast empire that Genghis Khan had forged throughout his life. Several manuscripts and documents were also reportedly discovered, carefully preserved inside specially made containers. Many believe the chamber held religious texts, military records, and possibly even personal writings. Food remnants were also found inside, and traces of meat, grains, and fermented beverages that matched the customs of that era in Mongol culture. The gold ornaments and other precious items made it clear this was far from an ordinary grave. Then the attention of everyone present shifted to the human remains resting at the very heart of the chamber. It is said that the whole mood in the room shifted at that instant. A representative of the Darkhead community quietly began to offer a prayer. For several minutes, not a single word was spoken. Every beam of light stayed fixed on that central spot. What did the DNA reveal? And why did the world find itself divided? The study of the objects recovered from the chamber went well beyond simply observing them. Scientists were now determined to establish who this burial actually belonged to. The first step in that process was radiocarbon dating. According to early reports, the tests indicated that the burial dated to the early part of the 13th century. That time frame aligned with the year 1227, which is widely accepted as being around the time of Genghis Khan's death. This was the first powerful sign that the team might truly have uncovered one of the most legendary lost tombs in all of history. Following that, scientists attempted to extract DNA from the human remains. Given that the remains were centuries old, the task was anything but straightforward. Yet, after months of painstaking effort, they managed to recover usable genetic material. The analysis reportedly revealed markers associated with haplogroups commonly found among Mongolian and Central Asian populations. While this alone could not confirm the identity of any single individual, it painted a far more compelling picture when considered alongside the other evidence. It was not only the DNA that came under scrutiny. The garments and weapons discovered inside the chamber were examined in thorough detail as well. The style and workmanship of the clothing corresponded closely to Mongol traditions of the 13th century. The weapons bore visible signs of actual use, suggesting they had not been crafted merely for ceremonial purposes. The dimensions of the armor were also reported to match the physical build of the individual whose remains lay within. Taken together, all of these findings led a great many scientists to conclude that this was no resting place of a common warrior. Yet even as researchers appeared to be drawing closer to a definitive answer, a heated debate began to spread across the globe. In Mongolia, many people regarded this as the most significant discovery in their national history. To them, Genghis Khan is far more than a ruler. He is a powerful symbol of national identity. At the same time, there were those who feared that disturbing such a sacred site could invite misfortune. The controversy deepened considerably when it emerged that the site lay not within Mongolia itself, but in Inner Mongolia, a region under Chinese authority. This immediately sparked questions around ownership and jurisdiction. The cultural significance of the find was immense for both China and Mongolia. Scholars from Russia also expressed keen interest, describing it as part of a wider Eurasian heritage. The entire world was caught up in arguing over who this discovery rightfully belonged to. But certain researchers had their focus trained on something altogether different. They were convinced that the true answer had yet to surface, because the greatest mystery still lay locked within those ancient manuscripts. Manuscripts, buried secrets, and the outer edges of scientific knowledge. Once the examination of the remains, weapons, and other artifacts from the tomb had been completed, the world's attention shifted entirely toward the ancient manuscripts that had been sealed inside that darkened chamber for hundreds of years. According to early accounts, these documents had been preserved with remarkable care. Teams of specialists immediately set to work attempting to translate them. Yet even after a considerable amount of time had passed, the full contents were never released to the public, and that, of course, only made the curiosity of the world grow stronger. Reportedly, the translation of certain sections is still underway, while other portions have been deliberately withheld from the public. Beyond that, there were conversations suggesting that some documents released in the earlier phases were later pulled from circulation. These claims were never officially verified, yet they certainly left many questions hanging in the air. What exactly was written in those manuscripts that couldn't be shared with the world straight away? Around the same time, another significant controversy began to take shape. There were those who felt the tomb ought to be sealed once more. In their view, it was a sacred space that should never have been touched in the first place. On the opposite side, numerous historians and scholars wanted the entire site turned into a museum so that visitors from every corner of the globe could come and witness this remarkable historical find. Certain experts proposed a balanced approach somewhere in between. Their thinking was that the site should stay protected in its original location, thorough documentation should be carried out, and only a carefully chosen selection of artifacts should ever be put on display for the general public. But the argument wasn't really limited to this single tomb. It opened up a far larger and more difficult question. For hundreds of years, archaeological riches from across the world have been uprooted and placed inside foreign museums. In countless situations, the sentiments of local communities were completely overlooked. Even now, some people hold that science and research must take priority, while others argue that certain locations and certain secrets are worthy of deeper respect. This is precisely the point where the tension between science and culture becomes impossible to ignore. Does every mystery truly need to be solved? Must every sealed door be pushed open? If a community has guarded a place as holy for generation after generation, is it really justified to cross that line simply in the name of modern technology? If this story moved you, be sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel so you never miss another fascinating tale.